From Chicago studios, this is a Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana, Siddiqui. First, the headlines. Biden says saving democracy is a challenge of our time as he hosts summit of 100 countries. Biden warns Putin of sanctions like none he's ever seen if Ukraine attacked. House of Representatives passes Uyghur forced labor bill in 428-1 vote. U.S. COVID cases surge as vaccine progress slows and Omicron variant sparks fears. Taliban says Afghanistan has an inclusive government. Our top story tonight. President Joe Biden said saving democracy is the challenge of our time at a summit of 100 countries he's hosting at the White House. He noted that half of all democracies have experienced a decline in at least one aspect of democracy over the last 10 years. Justice for All and other human rights organizations have criticized the summit for the inclusion of major human rights violators like Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Many, including Justice for All, are organizing parallel sessions on the topic. President Joe Biden said Wednesday he warned his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin of severe consequences if Russia attacks Ukraine. A day after their virtual summit, Biden said he told the Russian president the United States would retaliate with sanctions like none he's ever seen.
There were no minced words. It was polite, but I made it very clear. If in fact he invades Ukraine, there will be severe consequences. Severe consequences. Economic consequences like none he's ever seen or ever have been seen in terms of being imposed.
The U.S. House passed legislation designed to punish China for its treatment of Uyghur Muslims, a move that is expected to anger Beijing and add to rising tension. The Uyghur forced labor bill was passed in a 428-1 vote yesterday. The law will restrict goods from the Xinjiang region, which Uyghurs call Eastern Turkestan. The vote shows a growing sentiment in the U.S. Congress for confronting China. Muslim American human rights organization Justice for All applauded the passage of the historic bill. It said it will stop China from benefiting from the forced labor of Uyghurs and other Turkic people. The vote follows the Senate's unanimous approval of a companion bill on July 15th. The U.S. House of Representatives passed a sprawling military policy bill late Tuesday. It contains nearly twice as much yearly funding as the Democrats' flagship social spending and climate bill. Stephen Miles, executive director of Win Without War, slammed the $778 billion National Defense Authorization Act. He called it a reckless misuse of resources, a windfall for war profiteers, and proof positive that most in Congress have little concern for the actual security of people in the United States or around the world. Over 1,200 Americans died yesterday of COVID-19 as infections and deaths rise in the United States. Meanwhile, on Wednesday, two right-wing Democrats, Senators John Tester of Montana and Joe Manchin of West Virginia, voted with Senate Republicans to repeal the Biden administration's vaccine or test requirement for large businesses. This is despite warnings that the move could undercut the nation's pandemic response. The Senate passed a resolution by a vote of 52-48, but its chances appear slim in the House. A Japanese study has found that COVID-19's Omicron variant, which is spreading worldwide, is 4.2 times more transmissible in its early stage than the Delta variant. And now for international news. A human rights lawyer in India who was detained for more than 3 years without trial was freed on bail in Mumbai on Thursday. It is the latest case highlighting the Indian government's use of contentious anti-terror laws. 60-year-old Sudha Bharadwaj was arrested in August 2018. She was accused of inciting violence between different Indian castes. 16 others have been arrested in the same case. One of them, 84-year-old activist and Jesuit priest Stan Swami, died in pretrial detention in July. Bharadwaj, like Swami, was detained under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, or UAPA. This law allows people to be held without trial indefinitely. Critics say the law, which makes it difficult for accused people to receive bail, has been used by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government to silence dissent. The Indian government said in February that almost 6,000 people had been arrested under the UAPA between 2016 and 2019, with 132 convicted. A Kremlin statement said on Thursday that Russian President Vladimir Putin thanked former German Chancellor Angela Merkel for multi-year fruitful cooperation. In a phone call, the Russian president also praised Merkel's contribution to the development of bilateral relations. The statement noted that Merkel expressed gratitude to Putin for the joint work. It also wished him success in establishing a dialogue with the new head of the German government, Olaf Scholz. Putin said Merkel will always be welcome if she decides to visit Russia. AFP reported that Merkel formally handed over power to her successor on Wednesday, leaving her office in central Berlin by motorcade. For more about Chancellor Merkel, let's watch a special report by Saleha Farouk.
Und Frau Merkel für mich ist die Heldin in meinen Augen.
Mrs. Merkel is the heroine who saved my life. She gave me the chance to enter this country, to integrate, to feel comfortable here. She offered me security. For me, she's the most powerful woman in the world. He is Enes Mudamani, a Syrian refugee, now a student in Berlin.
Und
I keep thinking about that moment, about the beauty of that moment for so many people who took their children by the hand, leaving their belongings behind so they could run faster. I was one of them. I ran as fast as I could to cross the border, and all this was possible thanks to Mrs. Merkel. The other countries didn't want us. Enes Mudamani is right. Other countries reject refugees. Refugees live in miserable conditions in France. Some are drowned while trying to cross the English Channel to get to the UK. The British Coast Guard even failed to help them. And we have all seen the images of 3-year-old Elan Kurdi, who died while his boat sank going to Greece. Greece now regularly pushes these refugees back to Turkey. Criticizing the European Union, the Pope recently said, "Please let us stop this shipwreck of civilization." The Pope is right. Angela Merkel worked to demolish borders in Europe. Now Europe is busy building walls and placing barbed wires. Angela Merkel was unique in Europe. She is a conservative politician. But unlike other right-wing leaders, instead of bombing others, she saved lives. Lives of more than 1 million people, mostly Syrians and mostly Muslims. She famously said,
"Wir haben so vieles geschafft, wir schaffen das."
"We can do this." These words began the refugee influx to Germany. This sentence also nearly cost her her job. Right-wingers raised the usual bogey of crimes by refugees. She answered, Germany is a strong country. They warned her about terrorism. She responded, we will manage. Donald Trump, not yet president, raised his head. He said it is a catastrophic mistake, but she stood her ground. She said there is one red line that we should not cross. It is a commitment to human rights, the respect of the dignity of the human being. There should be no compromises. That was 6 years ago. Today, 80% of Germans in schools like their refugee class fellows. Refugees are in universities. Refugees are working and paying their taxes. Enes Mudamani himself is studying communications at Berlin University. He is also famous for his viral selfie with Angela Merkel. The Chancellor has no children of her own, but her name lives on as Syrian refugees name their children after her. Angela, Angie, Merkel, and sometimes Angela Merkel. Mostly girls, but a few boys as well. Smart move, Angela, thank you. You were an angel to these refugees. Allah told Muslims saving one life is like saving humanity. And you saved 1 million lives. Thank you. May the world's politicians learn from you.
Afghanistan's Taliban government has once again rejected the demand by some Western countries to form an inclusive government with the participation of former officials. It called this an interference in their country's internal affairs. The Taliban say they have already constituted an inclusive government that includes representatives from all of the country's ethnic groups. In an interview with Andalu Agency, interim government spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid said previous government representatives would face public anger if put back in power. He added that Afghans know how to run their country. Italy's antitrust watchdog said it has fined Amazon $1.28 billion. This is for alleged abuse of market dominance. It is one of the biggest penalties imposed on an American tech giant in Europe. Global regulatory scrutiny of big tech has been increasing after a string of scandals over privacy and misinformation, as well as complaints that they abuse their market power. Iraqi Interior Ministry media official General Saad Ma'an announced that the U.S.-led international coalition against ISIS has finished its combat mission. He added that it will have completely finished the transition to a non-combat mission before the end of the year. Meanwhile, Afghanistan spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid said that 25 hideouts of the terrorist group have also been destroyed in the capital Kabul, as well as in the city of Jalalabad. He accused the country's previous government of strengthening ISIS to use them against the Taliban. The Chinese government warned that Western countries will pay the price for their diplomatic boycott of the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. The US, the UK, Canada, and Australia have refused to send official delegations to the Games. This is to send a message to the Chinese government in relation to its human rights abuses against Uyghurs in Xinjiang. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman Wang Wenbin said whether their officials come or not, we will see a successful Beijing Winter Olympics. A Palestinian teenager police arrested Wednesday for allegedly stabbing an Israeli is from a family battling eviction in East Jerusalem. The 14-year-old suspect was tracked down to a school in the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah after police fanned out on the ground and used a helicopter to search for her. The stabbing victim, a Jewish resident of Sheikh Jarrah, was cleared for release yesterday. Sheikh Jarrah is one of a number of East Jerusalem neighborhoods where Jewish settlers have tried to evict Palestinian families from their homes. The settlers say the properties belonged to Jews before Israel's 1948 war for independence. Land rights tensions in the neighborhood exploded in May when at least 7 Palestinian families protested an attempt by Israeli settlers to evict them. Clashes erupted and led to 11 days of deadly fighting between Israel and Palestinian militants in Gaza. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
I am what hunger looks like in America. I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school. Because this may be the last time I'll have lunch. Till September. I am a single father of 2 who works 3 part-time jobs, and that's still not enough to put food on the table. I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Welcome back. The U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments last Tuesday on the Mississippi abortion law that bans abortions after 15 weeks. There are wide, diverse opinions about this law. Let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid to discuss what Islamic law says about this. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Samana. Taxes continue to rise in a dubious ways, whether it's the voter registration or limiting people what they can do in their life, or trying to change the abortion provision of the U.S. Constitution and Supreme Court's decision. But that is something the whole America is talking about. We'll talk about that as well. We have done that in the past. But there is another angle, and that is that Texas law is being compared to Sharia law. and Taliban are brought in, and burqa are brought in, and all those things are happening. To discuss with us is someone who knows better, who knows the Sharia law, who is an adjunct professor at Rutgers Law School, and he's an international expert on Islamic law. Abid Awad. Welcome to Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, brother. Thank you very much for inviting me, and best of luck with the Muslim TV network. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Tell us this, why suddenly a Texas law is being compared to Taliban, and there are cartoons about women in Afghanistan praying for women in Texas and all of that. Who came up? I mean, is it that another sign of the liberal Islamophobia in America?
Well, unfortunately, Islamophobia cuts across all political spectrums, whether from the left or from the right, including our own community, promotes sometimes stereotypes and Islamophobic tropes without knowing that they're doing it. For example, there were people in our community who were comparing the Alabama law, for example, as Sharia Christian law. So this is an issue that is structural in our country, in the United States. The Islamophobic movement, this anti-Muslim bigotry, it's not new. There's a history and a context for the rise of Islamophobia in the US. Sometimes you need to dig deeper to better understand. So take this movement that's called the anti-Sharia movement that started back in the, right shortly after 9/11. A Jewish Zionist right-wing Brooklyn lawyer named Shlomi started this movement to draft legislation and have states adopt anti-Sharia laws, meaning they wanted every state to adopt a law that would say judges in the state of Wisconsin, in the state of Texas, are prohibited from considering Sharia in their decisions. Now, this was totally unnecessary because our constitutional system separates between state and church, and religious law is not to be interpreted by secular state or federal judges. So when he was interviewed in the New York Times, he was asked, this is not really necessary. The protections for American citizens against any type of law that would violate their constitutional rights is already present. So why doing this? He said, it doesn't matter if these laws are passed. It doesn't matter if they're unconstitutional. We just want people to start paying attention and ask the question, what is the Sharia? And align the Sharia with totalitarianism, with misogyny, with political imperialism, with all these negative connotations. So this was the start of this movement. Muslims started being afraid of the word Sharia. Americans assigned the Sharia to ISIS. The Sharia is the Taliban. Everybody missed the entire boat on what the Sharia means for us as Muslims. For us Muslims, the Sharia is a moral compass that governs everything about our life, from the way we eat, to the way we worship, to the way we distribute our estate when we die, to the way we marry, divorce, our obligations to the poor, our obligations to the needy, our obligations to our elders. This is a moral compass that has been a methodology to engage with the divine message for 14 centuries, has been distilled as a political ideology. So yes, this is what the problem is. There is Islamophobia anchored in a bigotry and misinformation and ignorance in the United States that is fueled by the right-wing people like Urshalomi, like many of our politicians, just like last week. What did we hear from Baber, the congresswoman, and complaining that Ilham Omar is a terrorist? So this is endemic in our country, and we as a community, we have to fight back, and we should not accept them defining what the Sharia is. We should not hide or run away from what the Sharia is. We should embrace it as a moral compass for us as Muslims in America.
Well, tell us, Professor Awad, you referred to New York Times interview to David Yerushalmi, who himself is a Jewish, and he came up with those laws which have been probably adopted in 7 or 8 states. Did New York Times ask him that you are a Jew and Jewish law called halakha is implemented and used? Actually, there are Jewish courts. What is it called? I think Beit Din or something.
Yeah, the Beit Din.
So did New York Times compared and ask that question to him?
Unfortunately, they didn't. And again, what you would see from the right wing of this country is that they take the position that the U.S. Legal system is, or our entire country is a Judeo-Christian country. And that's their avenue, is that Islam is actually not part of America. In fact, Islam has been part of America since its founding. Almost 30 to 40% of the slaves that were brought here were Muslims, and Muslims were fasting and praying in the 16th century all the way through until today. So that's really the misinformation and the ignorance of the right wing in this country, and it's unfortunate, and we have to fight back, and we have to correct this misinformation and this ignorance. And the problem that I see with our own community is that the Sharia in Islam is not monolithic. It's a very decentralized religious interpretive system, as a juristic system that allows diversity of opinion. We have to embrace that diversity and reconnect with our classical tradition. In our classical tradition, the scholars, when they defined what is fiqh, they said fiqh is ilm al-ikhtilaf, the science of difference. So for Muslims, we celebrate difference. We engage with difference amongst our religious scholars. And I am one of these advocates trying to resurrect a discussion about the sophistication, the nuance of the Sharia, and that the Sharia as a methodology that produces knowledge is able to adapt and accommodate to the circumstances of Muslims in America quite beautifully and smoothly. It's able to do that. And I have illustrated and proven that in my own law practice and work with Muslim Americans around the country.
Professor Abed, tell us this. What is the position in Islamic law, if it is the knowledge of the differences about abortion? Because most Muslims, by and large, consider themselves pro-life and anti-abortion. Even if they vote for Democratic Party, they hold these views. What has been classic opinion of Islamic scholars, how they agree and differ when it comes to abortion?
The first issue the scholars have to determine, is the fetus a life? And if it is a life, what is the consequences of termination? Relying on a hadith from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which opined that a fetus is endowed with a soul, nafakh ruh, a ruh in this fetus is breathed in from the divine at 120 days. So with that tradition as a timeline, the scholars then differed on what are the consequences of terminating prior to the 120 days in terminating after 120 days. Some scholars took the position that terminating after 40 days is prohibited. Others took the position after up to 80 days, after 80 days is prohibited. And a vast majority took the position of 120 days. Now the question is, what are the consequences? So if it's before 120 days, some said it's permitted, but there has to be a valid reason. Obviously, all scholars took the position, with very few minority, that if the life of the mother is at risk, the termination is permitted. Now, some took the position that even if it is before 120 days, the termination would be makruh. And again, another sophistication that is contrary to Western legal system, that is inflexible and focused literally on black and white and certainty. American law is about certainty. This is legal or illegal. But the Sharia looked at every human conduct would come under one of 5 categories. It could be halal, it could be haram, it could be mandub, makruh, wajib. So you had these gray areas. So some scholars took the position if you did terminate before 120 days without a valid reason, that would be makruh, but it is not haram. And scholars, even the Hanbali school, which is many of the Hanbali school take the position that it's more restrictive on the abortion. Ibn Aqil took the position that a woman can take medicine to abort her fetus before 120 days. So again, the diversity was there. And what Muslims forget and miss is that this is a religious moral issue between the woman and her creator. If there's no Muslim police going to look to find which woman terminated her pregnancy and put them in jail, there was no coercive state power to implement these laws, because these laws are diverse and depends on the Muslim and the school of thought that they follow. If she committed sin in terminating, she's accountable to Allah, not a power that's going to implement it. She's accountable to Allah for that sin. In fact, many of the scholars in the fiqh books also discuss what is the kafara for terminating a pregnancy. So showing you how the Islamic legal system is communitarian, personal, decentralized, and it's not forced upon Muslims by force of coercion. So that's kind of like the understanding of the Muslim Sharia system within its diversity and flexibility. And even if the termination was prohibited, what would happen is that the mother who terminated would have a responsibility to pay financial compensation. It would be a diya, a blood money, to the heirs of the fetus. So these just show the sophistication and the flexibility of the system in a pre-modern modern period, which is sad that in many Muslim countries, at least from the Arab countries that I study, like Egypt, Syria, Jordan, termination is a crime. It's a crime. And you can go to jail. Why? Because we adopted the French civil code in the Arab world and implemented the Western system and Western law to apply to Muslims. Sharia is much more nuanced and flexible than those Western codes that most Muslim countries have adopted.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Awad, for your time, and we look forward to talking to you again. Jazakallahu khaira. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you very much, Imam.
Back to you, Samana.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.